I grew up here on Hidden Valley Road, on the outskirts of Colorado Springs. It looks like such a peaceful place, but things aren't always as they seem. I was the youngest of 12 children. From the outside, our family looked picture perfect. And that's just how our parents wanted it. But behind closed doors, it was another story. And it tore our family apart. My brothers were turning into something none of us understood. As a child, I thought they'd been taken over by demons. The violence they unleashed was terrifying. Murder, rape, suicide. For those of us that survived, we had to watch as 6 of my brothers were consumed by madness. In the end, the consequences would consume us all.
Where schizophrenia is diagnosed between age 17 and 24.
It's a tragic story. To be the part of the Galvin family is to be part of a tragedy.
This mutation was present in every person in that family who had schizophrenia.
They might hear voices. They can command them to do things.
Thrown a cat into a bonfire, dismembered a dog in the bathtub.
This family gave us hope that there might be a chance to cure schizophrenia.
He shot her first, and then he shot himself.
Well, it started to fall apart. My brothers were falling ill. They were losing their minds.
These are all the family photos. There's boxes and boxes of them, and they're quite heavy. I'm Mary Christine Galvin, which my mother always said was named after Mary, the mother of Christ. I was born into this large Irish Catholic family. I was the youngest of 12 children, 10 boys and 2 girls. Don, Jim, John, Brian, Michael, Richard, Joseph, Mark, Matthew, Peter, Margaret, and Mary. 6 of my brothers diagnosed schizophrenics. My mom describes that she saw signs, but couldn't really identify in her heart and mind what was going on. There was something going on with Jim. Peter breaking all the windows in the house. Donald, he dismembered a dog in the bathtub at home. It was like a snowball effect, my parents blaming themselves. There was so much despair and so much hopelessness and so much confusion. I didn't find out until much later as an adult, maybe in my 20s. Brian had murdered his girlfriend and committed suicide. I remember my mother just being distraught. My parents, I don't think they knew what to make of it. Never in their worst nightmares would they have believed such a thing could happen. Their children, young men that are so promising, to end up in a mental hospital. After Dawn was born. These are early pictures of my parents' relationship. They met at a swim meet. She jumped the gun and he had to go in the water after her. Then he asked her on their first date, they went to see The Wizard of Oz. And she said they skipped all the way home singing, "We're off to see the wizard." This is their wedding day. They eloped, but our parents never told us they had eloped. They told us about the grand wedding they had in New York at the rectory. But these are from Southern California when they eloped, because my mom was pregnant. It was a family secret, yes. And he was going to war. So they took the train from New York to Southern California, where he was getting ready to ship off for World War II. So he's in his whites, his Navy whites. Neither set of families were terribly happy because she was, Irish Protestant and he was Irish Catholic. And then at some point, she converted to Catholicism. And it was because my father said it would help their marriage, that they could then bring their children up in the same religion. It would make them closer as a family.
John, come and take a seat.
My mother was a wonderful woman. She always had our interest at heart, made sure we had piano lessons. The house was always full of music. We would listen to classical music all the time, and she would point out how to listen to the music. She'd say, "Oh, do you hear the French horns, or do you hear the oboe?" She liked to listen to Verdi operas, Mozart operas, and she loved to be involved and she loved to sing. She grew up in New York, and her mother took her to the Metropolitan Opera in New York City, and she fell in love with it. When my father joined the Air Force, moved to Colorado Springs from New York, I think my mother was probably very anxious about what kind of culture she would find in Colorado Springs.
The Air Force base was supposed to be on Long Island, and then they suddenly changed it to Colorado Springs. My dad had signed on thinking they were going to stay in New York, and then they ended up in Colorado Springs. My mother hated it. This was their first home. She said it was a dump. Here's 4 boys. So young Don, and that would have been Jim, John, and Brian was a baby here. September 1951, baby Brian's approximately 3 weeks old here. The Catholic Church believed in large families to keep the faith going. And so I think my parents just embraced that. They were doing their Catholic duty. Don and Jim and John and Brian and Richard, Robert Michael and Joseph as a baby. And my dad's in his uniform there.
I was always called number 6. Occasionally they would call me by my name, but I was number 6. I was right in the middle of 12. Hello. How are you? I was a little boy growing up with older brothers. We played baseball and did our things together, and hockey and tennis and swam and hiked and camped and lived a normal life. But it started to fall apart. I mean, people were getting sick. The boys, my brothers, were falling ill. They were losing their minds to schizophrenia.
Mark was the peacekeeper. If anyone could de-escalate a situation, it was Mark. He was a mathematician and a great chess player, and he was always got excellent grades. He was one of the better students in our family.
I'm in the middle of the youngest 5 boys. Richard and Joseph are the older 2, and Matthew and Peter are the younger 2. I lived on the Air Force Academy base until I was 5 years old, so I attended kindergarten there. Dad was a brilliant guy. As a political science professor, he taught Soviet foreign policy to the cadets back in the Cold War era.
Among the more significant achievements of our recent national history is the establishment of this leadership laboratory in Colorado. It is called the United States Air Force Academy.
When my father started teaching at the academy, we moved out onto the base. They house you by rank, so you get your colonels are up on one end, and then you go down to the majors are in the middle, and then you have the non-commissioned officers down south further. The officers' club had swimming pools and tennis courts. In the summertime, we would spend the whole day at the swimming pool and playing tennis. But all the kids went to school together. I think my parents were a little dismayed that I spent so much time with non-commissioned officers' kids. But they were my friends, and so we did a lot of things together.
Back then it was, military officer, and you were trying to get a leg up in the military hierarchy of the ladder system. They were climbing the ladder. And Dad was just a looked upon figure by the academy staff because he was in charge of the falconry program, and that was their mascot. That was a big deal. We had to go train falcons with them and feed them beef heart and chop it up and clean the newspapers and clean up the pen.
We went through training. Dad had set one on my head, and then he'd walk back so many paces and made his glove and have the bird fly to his glove, and we did that endlessly for hours.
I think the falconry at the Air Force Academy made my mother feel special, something they were known for. I think that's what my mom liked about it. It was unusual. And for my dad, it was just a fun sport that he got to do with his boys.
Arnold Hall was the concert venue for the Air Force Academy. That was a photo taken right after our 10th boy was born.
It was the Von Trapp family. That's what they used to call us. Sound of Music came out. I'll never forget Mom getting us all in the Volkswagen van. And I bet if we didn't see it 10 times, we saw it 20. And that's what she wanted us to be, is that Von Trapp family.
We all booed when Margaret came home from the hospital. All 10 of us boys sent my mom to tears. Our quarterback turned out to be a cheerleader.
Margaret, beautiful little girl growing up. This is the pride and joy of mother. And she was very smart, very talented, good kid. Didn't know anything was going on until later in life when I heard about the stories of Brother Jim. Mary was the second fiddle to Margaret. She was, okay, I got my pride and joy in Margaret, and then along came Mary.
People would say, why do you have so many children? And my parents would say, well, we wouldn't have the girls. Margaret always thought it was mean, but my mom used to say, the roses after all the thorns. So she called the boys the thorns, and Margaret and I the roses.
There were 3 acres of land, trees and shrubs and things surrounding the property. It was a beautiful setting.
Not a lot of privacy, with so many siblings living in the same house. 4 bedrooms upstairs and 2 baths. Downstairs, you had a bathroom and a bedroom off the stairway, but that was an open room. There was no door. And then the garage got turned into another bedroom.
Chaotic, but to me, it was just normal. Mom, 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 Peter hit me, Mom. Margaret's not being nice to me, Mom. Guessing she got that from everybody. She'd always go, tattletale tit, your tongue will be split and all the dogs in town will have a little bit. Because she just hated tattletelling. Because how could you keep up with it? You couldn't possibly be interfering in every conflict 12 children had. She'd say, go resolve it.
Mom was definitely a perfectionist when it came to house cleaning. All the boys were assigned tasks, whether it was sweeping the floor one day or doing the dishes the next day or cleaning the bathrooms another day or vacuuming. It was the white glove test, you know. If it wasn't clean, she would let you know and you'd do it over.
To my mother, social status was important. I don't think so much to my father, but I think he went along with it. She always liked to rub elbows or rub shoulders with famous people, famous artists, musicians, dancers, anyone in the arts.
She didn't like the military wives. They didn't listen to opera. Military wives. And she had trouble finding the culture that she was looking for. The church became a place where there were levels of importance, kind of a caste system in and of itself. The people that were more ingratiated with the priests were elevated in some way. It gave my mother some level of importance that the priest would come to our home. And I vaguely remember the priest coming. It was a big to-do. Oh, Father Freudenstein is coming. We need to get everything tidied up and make sure she had her tea on. He would show up at the door with records for her. He would bring her opera records to listen to. And as a gift, you know, to her.
I was not particularly fond of him, and I kind of distanced myself from it. It's like instinct. The only thing I have now is from what I heard from my brothers about him, the fact that he became physically or sexually abusive towards my oldest brother, Don.
Everything seemed so picture perfect. And then this other thing was happening at the same time. I mean, it just unraveled so fast. It was, how could this possibly be happening to them? They'd done everything right.
Donald, he was my father's favorite for sure. He was a great athlete. Their football team took state in his senior year, got into the state finals in wrestling. He played hockey. He was an all-around athlete. And I had kind of admired that when I was younger, looking up to him.
So these are pictures of Donald. My parents sort of elevated him in our family status. He was sort of the could do no wrong, perfect boy who, you know, got good grades, handsome, and dated the general's daughter. And there he is in high school, track and field.
It seems like everybody in the family followed suit. Jim was an athlete. I remember him playing football, highlight moment, blocked a punt and scored a touchdown.
Jim, he was always in competition with Don. From the time they were little, you know, who was better at baseball, who was a better swimmer, who could run faster, who could jump higher, who, you know, I think, and Donald was always superior. He was older. That really bothered Jim. That he was always sort of felt slighted or that he wasn't good enough, that my parents loved Don more.
The first time I recognized that Donald was my father's favorite, I was about 12 years old. And he would have been, well, 5 years older. And he became violent. I became his punching bag. He would have a couple of my brothers hold me so he could take swings at me, you know, and I had no way to defend myself. And so I was terrified of him after that. I told my parents about it, and my father ceased to believe anything I said, it seemed like, about Donald. If I would talk about Donald, it was like it just got shoved to the side was not believable. So you endured what you could, and then you avoided what you could. And I'm not the only one in the family that suffered that way.
When I was a child, I would wait on top of the hill opposite my home for my mother to come home. I would wait for her until her car pulled up. I was afraid of being beaten by my brothers. That was not something that's normal for a child to experience. You know, they would make me hold encyclopedias in my arms and hit me in the stomach and tell me not to drop them. Or even sometimes they would pour Tabasco sauce on my tongue or make me eat cat food. It's like the fear of this. And it was always something that was with me every day.
I was always breaking up the fights between the older brothers and the younger ones. Dad used to call me Kissinger, the diplomatic one. So I was always trying to make peace in the family. There was a lot of tension between John and Jim and Don, always fighting. The one I'll never forget is in Woodman Valley. Don and Jim started fighting in the house. Of course, Mother said, get out of the house if you're gonna fight. Donald started running after Jim down the road, Hidden Valley Road. And I'll never forget looking down the road with my mom and watching him. And Donald took a swing and lifted my brother up off the ground. I've never seen anybody get hit so hard in my life.
You know, I don't know if some of this had anything to do with Donald's mental health issues already, even though they weren't diagnosed yet. It could be that even as a younger boy, he had some mental issues that caused him to behave toward us like he did.
Donald met Jean in college and brought her home and told the family that he's going to get married. So we were all happy for him. You know, they were getting married, they were in college. Donald was a straight A student, I understood. Everybody was happy. Jean was just a very nice lady, big, tall, strong woman. She was a rancher's daughter, you know, very tough-minded.
I can only tell you what is hearsay. Again, I didn't know them very well, but Don wanted to have a family. Jean didn't. Jean wanted to pursue her doctoral degree. Don wanted to start a family. I think that was a huge rift between them. Might have tipped the scales on Donald as far as his mental illness. I'm not sure it made any difference, but probably did.
Donald, he went away to college when I was 6. Didn't really see him much in the next several years until he came home. And by then he was very much in psychotic states from time to time.
My first memory of Donald is his coming home from college and being very, very upset and crying. And my bedroom being adjacent to my parents, and there being a lot of yelling and screaming and commotion, and him on his knees saying, "What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Help me, please help me." Everyone was awake in the house, and what's going on, what's going on? Donald was screaming and yelling at everybody in the house to please get down, that there's somebody outside that's trying to hurt us. My mother, saying, oh, dear God, what is going on? Is he on drugs? Get the younger children out of the environment where my father was trying to calm him down. This is Donald's records from Colorado State University Student Health Services. This student is the oldest of 12 children, 10 boys, 2 girls. He's been self-supporting in school. He gave up an apartment to save expenses and is living in an old fruit cellar, which he described as large enough to hold his mattress. He has no water. In past 2 weeks, has run through bonfire, put cord around his neck, turned on gas, and even gone to a funeral home to price caskets. Very sadistic killing of a cat and fantasies of killing a person at a football game. Fear realistic at the time that he had killed an instructor. Dr. Oxman, a psychiatrist, predicted he was dangerous to others. And then it says possible schizophrenic reaction. Recommendation, immediate hospitalization for evaluation and prescription. Being admitted to a state mental hospital when your child is, however old he is, 20, 21. I mean, I think of that now. My son is 22. And what would that emotionally feel like to be told that your son is schizophrenic and that he needs to be sent to a place that everyone knew was horrific.
For years, what was called insanity was regarded as a problem for each state to solve as best it could. In nearly all state mental hospitals, little more than custodial care was provided. Few who were committed could hope to return to society. Many whose illnesses were comparatively mild at the start became increasingly worse until all hope of recovery vanished.
There were dark chapters in the history of treatment of psychiatric patients. Castration was common, taking out people's pancreas. Lobotomy was a way of cutting into the brain and breaking up fibers that connect cells in the brain to each other.
Operations can be performed under local anesthesia if the patient is sufficiently cooperative.
Surgeons would cut a hole in your skull, introduce a knife into that hole, and then go like this with the knife to cut the fibers in the frontal lobe of your brain. And that became a very popular procedure in certain institutions. And the frontal lobe is the part of your brain that learns from experience, that uses judgment. It's the executive of your brain. When you break up the frontal lobe's connection to the rest of the brain, you've obviously reduced somebody's capacity to exercise all those frontal lobe functions, but you've made them much more docile.
For Don's mom, just can't imagine just the shock, the shame, and the fear that Mimi experienced, and her husband as well. That to have a son whom you love, and you've seen this very handsome, beautiful son, and now you're having to have him in an institution. I think it would have been horrifying.
Well, here, I mean, he's being diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he's being recommended immediate hospitalization. And I can't read the date, but I'm assuming, well, it's different handwriting. So, patient was not admitted per instructions, but has been treated as an outpatient at the Air Force Academy Hospital. So this is the letter from the Department of the Air Force. Our findings showed no evidence of serious thinking disorder, nor of symptoms secondary to a psychotic process. It is my considered opinion that Mr. Galvin can function in the academic setting at CSU. That's unbelievable. My father was probably trying to use his influence to keep Don in school. I think my parents were like, shape up and get on with it. Somehow I think they were wishing or hoping or praying that this would be a temporary situation that he would somehow outgrow, and if he just stuck with his studies, that he would be okay. Certainly, sending him to Pueblo to a psychiatric hospital would have admitted defeat. They would have had to accept the diagnosis that he was, in fact, schizophrenic. Were my parents so blind to what was going on with him? Were they so trying to ignore it or pray it away? Whatever they were doing with this information was putting somebody else in danger.
You know, when Donald first came home from college, they weren't seeking treatments for him at the time, I don't believe. They were just trying to keep him home and take care of him the best they could, and hopefully that wouldn't disrupt the rest of the family too much.
They did the best they could under the circumstances. What else were they going to do but just try to minimize the exposure of the illness so they could maintain their status, if you will, with the governors and people they were dealing with. They were dealing at a very high level in our society. My father, he was what I call an overachiever. He was doing too much for most people even comprehend. He actually wrote a book about American politics, and he got his doctorate degree.
That was a proud moment, I suppose. You know, I was proud of him for doing that. Having a big family and going to school and doing your doctoral degree. That doesn't happen very often. That's pretty rare, I think. We ordered Kentucky Fried Chicken. Had a picnic out on the lawn in front of the Boulder Library. Yeah, I can remember that day. It was a nice day. It was a good day. But probably no more family gatherings that were as nice after that.
After Dad's graduation, this is 1969, so I would say shortly after that was when Donald really became seriously ill.
I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. I remember Don being psychotic and it being scary. He paced constantly paced and paced and paced and paced and talked to himself, just hours and hours and hours and hours on end. He paced and talked to himself. He, I think, believed himself to be a prophet. He was dressed in these robes, this brown sheet. He created these rituals around his life.
The biblical babbling, I called it. It was just always relating everything to the Bible. Everything that went on in the world was related to the Bible somehow. He was just trying to stay into reality of some sort. I can remember Dad lecturing him. He would take him up into his bedroom and lecture him, but you could hear it through the house. You know, why are you doing this? Why are you going to the school in a priest robe? What are you doing? You're embarrassing this family.
I certainly wouldn't want to be seen in public with him at the time, you know, for afraid he would do something crazy. None of my friends knew that I had a mentally ill brother. It was not something that we talked about. It was my dad's philosophy that you don't air your dirty linen in public. Mom felt the same way.
To me, this would be the family shame. You know, my father was always about trying to keep a family reputation, and you're known by the company you keep. And so I think he was afraid that the stigma of schizophrenia. Anybody finding out about it would affect what he did.
Don was the bad guy now in the family. He was the one that was causing so much trouble. And my mother relied on Jim to get the younger children out of the house. So then while we were with him, Jim would just go on and on. He even gave him a name, Gookoid. Oh, it's Gookoid again. Jim was very cruel, very cruel. I was unaware as a child, Jim was mentally ill. I had no understanding or indication that he had sought treatment and that my parents had helped him get treatment. And in retrospect, of course, you know, he was quite ill.
The dynamics started changing in the family. I remember Dad and Donald getting into fisticuffs. Nobody ever challenged Dad up until Donald. And Donald was stronger. I don't know how long they fought for, but it was a serious fight. Bodies crashing to the ground, wrestling, and fists being thrown. And my brother Donald won.
And I do remember Donald coming after my mother physically a few times. And it always was probably around her being the one that told him to take his medications. Have you taken your medications? And Donald would say, screw you, I'm not taking that stuff. And my mother would say, yes, you are. And he'd say, no, I'm not. And so a conflict would ensue.
There was a lot of bad times for Mom, and I don't know how she did it, come to think about it, and just how Donald stayed in that home with her just so he wouldn't have to spend his life in a mental hospital.
I remember one in particular where my father and Donald were wrestling. And I remember there was this mushroom, it was crystal. I remember that being picked up and used as, and that could kill someone easily. It was a heavy object. And I remember being terrified that Donald was gonna kill my father because my father was trying to protect my mother from Donald. Often, Donald's anguish was centered around his wife having left him. And he was obsessed, absolutely obsessed with finding Jean. And I would guess she probably had to find a way to get away from him where he couldn't necessarily find her. And I remember my parents getting a phone call from the police. 10:20 a.m., Donald Kenyon Galvin, 24, was booked for protective custody in connection with an alleged homicide attempt. Mixed acid and cyanide and held his wife and himself in the room. He had little insight and gave little feeling about the seriousness of his actions. He is psychotic and that he is losing control and insight, is dangerous to himself and the community. I feel so for my parents. I mean, they were brilliant people. They seem to have really had a pretty picture-perfect thing going from the outside.
You know, they had this beautiful family that, you know, my mom put on her white gloves and off to church we went with our beautiful outfits all perfectly pressed.
If you look at the first incident, which was really Donald, it took 10 years before we really started to know something was really wrong. Nobody knew who had what or what was going on.
I don't think they knew what to make of it all. I think my parents were so dumbstruck. How could this possibly be happening to them?
It's a tragic story. To be the part of the Galvin family is to be part of a tragedy.
What's your relationship with Donald today?
I don't have one. I never see him. I don't think he cares.
It's very difficult to be around people that are mentally ill, like my brother Donald, because they're so harmful and they get into your psyche.
Don, okay, you comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if there's anything you don't want to answer, just say, move on.